evening. Let's call to order this Committee of the Whole for the City Council of Highland Park, Illinois, February 12th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ross. Present. Councilmember Vogler.
Present.
Councilmember Tapia.
Present.
Councilmember Littler.
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
Here.
Mayor Rory.
Here, we have quorum. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 29th regular meeting?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
Oh, okay. Sounds good, thank you. They are approved. Scheduled business, we have a couple of items tonight. Our first one is a discussion regarding section 119.320 concerning local liquor license applications. And the other one is Second Street lighting design options. We're gonna start with the,
Excuse me?
yes,
I'm gonna have to recuse myself from the first discussion.
okay, thank you. All right. I'm just gonna make a couple of comments, and then I think you and Hart wanted to walk us through
Yes.
some sort of updates. And I'll just start with the following. Not one of us, not a single one of us is happy to be in this situation. Tonight, in the council meeting, we'll be talking about a decision that came about, frankly, because the ethics guidelines of our city weren't being followed. Nobody went looking for this conflict. Upon taking office, we each took a pledge to uphold the laws of Highland Park, and that includes following protections against conflicts of interest. And I'm just going to share with you so that everybody's coming from the same page. From the City of Highland Park Ethics Guidelines, in Section 1, there's a declaration of policies and purpose. The proper operation of democratic government requires that public officials of the city be independent, impartial, and responsible to the city, the sole purpose of which is to serve and protect the public health, safety, and welfare of its residents. It's therefore imperative that city offices not be used for personal, financial, or political gain, or to advance the interests of family members, and that the public have confidence in the integrity of city government. City officials should not exercise favoritism in the course of performance of their duties, and no one party should receive a benefit from any city action due to relationship with a city official beyond that which is available to any other party seeking similar relief. In all circumstances, city officials should conduct themselves in a manner that prevents impropriety, as well as the appearance of impropriety. And then it goes on to say that the purpose of these ethics guidelines is to establish ethical standards of conduct for all city officials, be they members of the city council, members of a city agency, board, or commission. These guidelines set forth those acts or actions that are incompatible with the proper performance of a city official's duties. These guidelines also set forth the proper course of conduct for city officials when presented with a situation that may give rise to such incompatibility or to a conflict of interest. And so, unfortunately, because our ethics guidelines were not followed on several occasions, questions were raised by a number of people concerning discussion, participation, and votes related to the liquor code and the potential conflict of interest by a city council member who owns a liquor manufacturing, distribution, and related restaurant business. It was clearly unintentional, but it still happened. And that's what brought us to this point. And a review of the law indicates that in Highland Park, like the vast majority of our neighboring communities, public officials are currently prohibited from holding liquor licenses. So the reason why, and I'll just be very direct, it's because it creates a situation so very ripe for conflict and decisions being made that do not solely serve the interests of the public. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Newkirk and Corporation Counsel Hart Passman.
Thanks, Mayor. So Corporation Counsel, at my direction, prepared a comprehensive memorandum pertaining to the issue that you presented this evening, a review of our local as well as state laws, and included case law in here as well. That memorandum was shared with the mayor and city council. And so Corporation Counsel Passman will provide a high-level overview of the memorandum. And then what I'd like to do is just share, just to make sure the council is aware of our administrative process that we undertake for both new applications as well as renewals of liquor licenses. And then specifically what steps that we have implemented and are implementing right now, not only for liquor license applications, but really for all applications to help ensure that this does not happen in the future.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Manager Newkirk. Thank you, Mayor. As the manager said, I just want to give a very brief and high-level overview. And as noted, City Manager's Office directed us, oops, sorry. You don't need a mic. The City Manager's Office directed us just earlier this month to do a real thorough review of the history and content of state law and city code regarding issuance of liquor licenses to elected officials and municipalities. We did that deep dive. We looked at legislative history, the text of the current statute, text of prior statutes, some case law. That's all reflected in the memorandum that we provided to the City Council. I wanted to hit kind of the high points of the state law and the city code, and then just review briefly the options that we've identified for the council. First, as it relates to the state law, as the prohibition on the issuance of liquor licenses to law enforcing public officials of a municipality and to elected officials of a municipality has existed in the State Liquor Control Act since its adoption in 1934. The Liquor Control Act was enacted shortly after Prohibition ended, and we've had that law has been the basis of Illinois liquor law for this 90-year period. From 1934 until 2001, there was no substantive change to that prohibition. In 2001, the legislature added an exception to the prohibition, allowing the issuance of liquor licenses to public officials and municipalities if they had a population of 50,000 or less. There were some criteria included in the statute when that was available, and those are detailed in the memorandum. Probably the most notable of those is that it had to be a license for sale of alcohol incidental to the sale of food. So bar licenses weren't allowed under that statute, but perhaps a restaurant license would be. That statute was later amended in 2013 to increase the number to 55,000. And that's where the state law exists today. As it relates to the city code, our review indicates that a prohibition on the issuance of licenses to elected officials in Highland Park has existed for several decades. It goes back as far as city records can go when the city had any liquor laws at all. Our understanding is that the city did not even allow the sale of liquor until something like 1972. There is no indication in any minutes of any meeting of this council or the committee of the whole at which the city council discussed that prohibition and whether or not to amend it. As we noted in the memo, there are some communities in the area that, following the 2001 amendments to the statute, enacted a similar type of exception for issuance of licenses in their communities. We have no record of the Highland Park City Council ever even considering it, let alone taking any action on it. And so the city's prohibition, likely written in because that was in the state statute at the time, has carried through from at least 1972 to the present day. Coming up to the present, the options the city council has, in a nutshell, Mayor, there are three. And I know the council knows this, but for everyone's benefit, there are two alternative actions that have been prepared for your consideration for your main meeting at 7:30 in the council chambers. One option is to amend the city code. You could amend the city code to change the current prohibition against issuance of these liquor licenses. Another option is for the current license to undergo revocation proceedings. That is not an action this council can undertake. That is solely within the purview of our local liquor control commission. So the council doesn't really have a hand in that, but that is an option. And the third option, which is a viable option, is to do nothing. You have no duty to do anything with respect to the existing license that's been issued to Ravinia Brewing Company. And that is I would emphasize it without putting a thumb on the scale, Mayor. I don't want anyone to misread. I'm saying that is a valid option. As it relates to the two items on your agenda for the 7:30 meeting, you could approve one or the other or neither. It does not make sense to adopt both of them, to both either affirm the existing code or to amend it. It would not make sense to do both, but you can do one or the other or neither. You're under no obligation to do either one of them. So that's where it stands right now, Mayor. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you or the council may have.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to share, you did 50-city research of our neighboring communities, and while Highwood does allow sitting council members to hold liquor licenses, of the 50 cities we looked at, 42 continue to prohibit city council members, mayors, so on, from holding liquor licenses. And that includes, I would say, the majority of our peer communities, and you had that in your
Yeah.
memo, Deerfield,
Yeah,
Barrington, Buffalo Grove, Glencoe, Kenilworth, Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, Monroe, Mettawa, Niles, Northbrook, on and on and on. So it's not like we're unique. It is, there's some misinformation that's out there, but I have to say, the vast majority of our communities in this region, including the members of the Northwest Municipal Conference, which is this region, still have this law on their books. And I'll just share, could this be resolved by changing the existing law? Sure. But my feeling is if we respond to violations of liquor laws by changing the law, particularly for a sitting council member, then frankly, what's the point of having the laws? I have more to say, but I want to hear from my council colleagues and happy
Can
to,
I just, maybe just jump in if you don't mind?
feel free.
Okay. I just want to just make sure, really for public information, but chapter 119 of the city's municipal code is available on the city's website, pertains to all matters concerning alcoholic beverages. And so this is the chapter of the municipal code that sets forth the types of licenses, the application process, the renewal process, investigations, and so forth. So there is an application that we make available both for new liquor license holders as well as the renewal of license holders. And so as a staff, that is done as part of an administrative review and consideration process. And, you know, generally we are making sure that the owner of the property, you know, that there's a lease for the subject property. We are reviewing any convictions. We are reviewing, making sure that there's appropriate insurance, dram shop, people are BASA trained, and so forth. And so, so that is done for new licenses on an ongoing basis. The renewal of licenses is done in the winter, and those are reviewed and considered ideally before January 1st, when the renewal takes effect January 1. Individuals are both required to obtain a local license as well as a state license. So in light of the information that we learned about following legal research, we took immediate steps as a staff, again, to help ensure that this does not happen in the future. So whereas right now there is a question on the application that asks, is the applicant an elected official or law enforcement official? And it's a yes and no. So what we're putting in place is if that answer is a yes, we are putting that specific code provision in the application process. So we know what the regulation is now, but in the future, we want to make sure that anything that is unique to our code is not just a question, but it is an explanation of why that question is being asked. And that's just one example. So there are other examples of questions, and again, we just want to make sure that a specific code provision ties back to flag that specific question. I will also add, it is certainly incumbent on the applicant to make sure that they understand and adhere to both local and state laws. And so, for example, if their lease changes or if ownership of the business changes, we wouldn't know that as a staff to go, you know, out and just solicit that information. So it is incumbent upon them with a certain time frame to certainly to let us know those things. But we want to make sure in partnership with our business community just to regularly remind them and make sure that they've got all the information so they are best informed as they go through this process.
And my understanding is, on the application, they have to sign affirming that they are not in contravention of any of the city laws and any of the state laws.
Correct, that they understand and will adhere to local and state regulations.
And they also have an affirmative duty, I understand, to let you know if something changes.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Within a certain
So if I could just put a finer point on it. Say I'm a new business and I submit an application. Who do I send it to? Who reviews it? What happens?
Well, so if we're talking specifically for liquor?
Sure.
Okay, because a building permit, for example, there's regulations, you know, throughout the municipal code of different types of applications and which division or department to review those. So specifically for liquor, that is within the clerk's division in the city manager's office, and so that is reviewed. That application process is also done a combination of between the clerk's office was also the police department, so they are reviewing license applications as well.
Okay, thanks. Tony?
I have just questions. I don't really have any comments. I want to make it clear that when you spoke about conflict issues, that those conflicts that we began investigating were separate and apart from the conflict caused by the possession of a liquor license. There was a conflict just of being in a certain business and having a certain interest in the outcome of legislation. The typical kinds of conflicts that the rest of us have periodically recused from. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. In addition, there is this liquor license issue. My second question is, whatever we do tonight, whether we amend our code, if we amend our code, the state of Illinois, it's the state law still require recusal of anybody on an elected basis or in law enforcement that is granted a liquor license, regardless of what we do.
Correct.
And lastly, you talked about the application and the affidavit that they comply with our code as well as the state code and other laws. Am I correct that we provide a copy of the relevant part of the code that includes the automatic prohibitions? When they sign the affidavit, I believe there's an identification, are you subject to any of the automatic prohibitions in Chapter 119? And a copy of that, as it stands now, is included by a hyperlink,
Yes,
correct?
That's correct, yes.
Prior to that time, when it was not done online, was that also provided along with the application?
Yes.
Okay.
And it basically says, we swear or affirm
That we've complied with the attached.
applicant and all directors, officers, partners, managers, and shareholders thereof are not disqualified to receive a local liquor license by reason of any provision of Chapter 119 of the city code, the laws of Illinois, or the ordinances of the city.
I understand that, but going to find Chapter 119 is, if your computer isn't handy or you don't do this regularly, that chapter is attached to that affidavit, so you can look and say, hey,
Here it is.
I comply with all this, or I don't comply with one of these.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Stone and Councilmember Littlemore, and
Um,
Councilmember Tapia.
So two things, just following up on what Councilmember Bloomberg said. So if somebody signed that document saying that they affirmed that they were eligible to hold a liquor license, they should have read Chapter 119 to know what it said. And so either they didn't read that chapter, they didn't understand that chapter, or they knowingly signed something incorrectly. Those are the three possibilities.
They should have read it. They signed something affirming that they,
Read it.
yes, will adhere to state and local laws, and we indicate in there the liquor regulations.
And then my second is, just to clarify, because as the mayor said, there was some information that was incorrect in some of what was going around in the news and other places earlier. And the Liquor Control Commission, I feel like I'm a relatively new member of the Liquor Control Commission, even though I've been on it for several years, because it hasn't met very often. And the reason it hasn't met very often is because we don't review
Licenses.
new applications, we don't review licenses, we only adjudicate when there's a violation. So I just wanted to make that clear, that's what that body does. That body does not review the applications or the renewals.
That's not
Vice-
a
That's
city
a
manager's
staff.
Correct. So, and if we could just remind everybody, just
To
speak
speak
into the
mic.
microphone.
Yes.
You as well, thank you. Yes, so the Liquor Control Commission, again, is included in the municipal code. So by state statute, and council can correct me if I'm wrong, but by state statute, the mayor or president of each local jurisdiction serves as the Liquor Control Commissioner. And there are two additional members of, in our case, the city council that serve on the commission. That commission meets as needed. So for example, in 2023, the commission met on 2 occasions. They hear considerations for new classifications of liquor licenses, or they will consider violations of the city's local regulations pertaining to liquor. And the administrative process of applications, both new applications and renewals, again, is done administratively. The mayor, as a liquor control commissioner, signs off on those, but it's an administrative process that's done internally by staff.
And so when someone fills out a form, we're relying on them to fill out the form properly. We're not going back and doing any sort of research to make sure that they're answering truthfully. By filling out the form and signing it, they're affirming that they've done this truthfully.
Correct, right. And we're making sure, like, if they don't provide insurance, we're making sure that their insurance is there, exactly, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions, and then I actually do want to
You
make a
could
couple of
speak into the
statements.
microphone, I think it would.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, Mayor, you said something about a lot of misinformation out there. Could you clarify what that is?
Sure.
Well, one piece of misinformation is what I was asking the manager about, which
Right,
was
who's
the
responsible for-
Liquor Control Commission and who signs off on those applications.
Okay, so that's what you were referring to?
That was incorrect in the Patch article, I believe.
Okay,
Right.
But there's
One
not.
other one is that this is an archaic ordinance that nobody knows is on the books. It most recently was revisited and revised statewide in 2012, and the majority of area communities have this law still on their books. Some have even added cannabis licenses. I think it's important for people to know that this doesn't go back to the Prohibition era. It goes back to 1972, which is when Highland Park allowed liquor to come through. And, you know, more to the point, this is, you know, an inadvertent error, unfortunately, by several people. And I think there's a lot of sort of cheap shots and finger pointing going on that are absolutely unnecessary.
okay, so that will get me to my next point. That's what I wanted to ask you. Okay, so that really helps me a great deal. And it helps me a great deal because, well, I did have one other question for you, but I think I'll first address this one. I don't agree with you. I do think it's an archaic law, and the reason I'll say that is because, and it actually was updated as recently as 2021. So it's even more current in terms of the fact that it's old, but it's been updated along the way. Council was wonderful enough to give us 51 different cities, and 10 of them have now on the books changed it. And we are number 11 and, in terms of discussing it. But the other 40, not only have they not changed it, so they're still a yes, they have this on the books, they've not considered it. It's not like something came up and they said, oh, by the way, you know, we have a restaurateur who wants to hold a license. According to council, this has not been discussed in front of a body in terms of changing it. Any body group, not person, any group that has looked at it has actually repealed it. So the 10,
Wait, how do you know that?
I asked council, and council went through that with me.
Everybody that's looked at it has changed it?
Of the 10 bodies that have had it come up on their
Hasn't changed
agendas,
it, so that's kind
they've
of-
changed it. No, but the other ones never considered it, is
How do
my
you know
point.
that?
I
Actually,
asked
that's
council.
actually- I'm sorry, I'm not gonna get into it with you, but I can tell you that I shared this conversation with several mayors
Mm-hmm.
who said they absolutely have changed it to add cannabis licenses.
Well, council, who happens to represent several cities, including our own, had said to me that when this came up 21 years ago in Oak Park, because the mayor wanted to be the mayor and was with a liquor license, they changed it. They waited for the state to change it from 50 to 55,000 because Oak Park had 52,000 people.
It didn't hurt that the senator took it up on his own.
Right.
Rammed it through. So-
And it went through and it
That's
became
precedent.
55,000, and then Oak Park changed their law. At the time, council considered bringing this up to his whatever number of clients, and frankly, everybody forgot about it. And so our professionals who have looked at this area over a period between 20 and 40 years have said this has been a long forgotten archaic law that was brought into account at that point. So of these other cities that have a yes on it, I just want to clarify
No, I appreciate
that
it.
with the
Thank you.
research that I've done and phone calls that I've made, it has not been considered. And when considered, it was repealed. So that was my one question. That's why I wanted to ask about the misinformation. But along those lines, there was one other question I had, because before I actually do my statement, I wanted to ask you. You brought up everything about ethics in the beginning. And in a way, I felt like that was conflating it with the issue that is about to be presented to us and that we're discussing now, which is whether or not to accept an amendment with regard to, again, I apologize, but I believe in archaic law, or not. And so I wanted to lead into my comments with the statement that, in fact, I really want to be true to the law that we're discussing. I don't want to get into exactly what you just said, Mayor, that of pointing fingers, that of assessing blame, that of figuring out whether someone should have checked off a box or someone didn't catch something. Because frankly, there's enough blame, and it's a very embarrassing thing, I believe, for our city. And I mean that for our city council, I mean it for our staff, I mean it for our residents. And it's not a hole that I would like to go under or down into. And I think the way to avoid that is to not get into a lot of these side issues, which I do believe are side issues. Because if we consider this law and make a resolution one way or the other, I think at that point we can reassess this from a different perspective, and it gives us a little bit more freedom to do so. And that's why I would really rather do that, because frankly, if we get into the renewal application and the fact that Councilmember Hoopler, did write on there that now for my renewal, I am a council member. So he updated that part of it, okay? If we get into who sits on the Liquor Commission, is there a conflict here? Should everybody be voting on this? Do we have the right quorum? How does this work? I think we're all in agreement that Councilmember Hoopler is not present precisely because he was made aware of this. But at some point when he was receiving all of his orientation and he was asking questions about at what point is there a conflict, and he's told always err on the side of being a business owner. You were elected because you're a business owner. You can talk about things like incentives. And this is going way back to when in May he had a joint session for coming in, and then further in. I don't want to get into those pointing fingers, and I certainly don't want to do it publicly when we are in our city council meeting, because I believe we are all better than that. And what I'd like to do is correct what I believe is sort of the worst draconian decision, instead of the kind of nice sculpting that we can do for this law, which is simply adopting the state law, which would then have protections in it, and not go into all the particulars of who has a conflict, who should sign, what should we do, who did this wrong, who did that wrong. I don't think anyone did anything wrong here. I really don't. I think that our staff did ministerially everything they could do. I think our council has administered laws as best they could. No one brought any attention to this because people frankly didn't know about it. And if they had, I don't think we would have had the same kind of behavior by anyone. I can't imagine for 1 minute that Councilmember Hoopler would have sat through the meeting 2 weeks ago had he known anything. I can't imagine that council wouldn't have said, Councilmember Hoopler, you better leave, if he'd known. I can't imagine that the liquor commissioners wouldn't have said, I'm not sure you should be in here. Maybe don't you hold a liquor license? So rather than point all of those fingers and get into those kind of battles, I think we should really discuss the merits of this law and whether we want people who are restaurateurs or who hold a liquor license to be a part of our body and a part of our community. And if we want them to do so, then that's one way we vote on the law. And if there are other issues with regard to Councilmember Hoopler's performance at any point, then I think under our ethics, we should take a look, if that's what you want to do. But this is about the law. And I don't see all those variations as doing anything but taking away from the good job that I know we all want to do for this community.
Can I respond? Because I know you had a statement that you wanted to share as well. We don't ask people to recuse. we are expected to disclose, because you don't know everything about what boards we sit on, what businesses we own, necessarily we file statements of economic interest, but it's incumbent on each of us, frankly, to recognize the potential for a conflict of interest, right? I mean, as I recall from
That's
the
correct,
time
Mayor.
I've been here. So it's on the individual to say, I have a conflict, I need to recuse. And the reason why I brought up this issue with the Code of Ethics, frankly, that's how we got here. Literally, that is how we got here. We didn't say out of the clear blue sky, as we were doing our comprehensive review of the liquor code, hey, by the way, I see this provision that also says this. Nobody even brought that up. But it was in the course of multiple conversations and multiple events that conflicts were arising and that were causing people concern. And that's where this entire thing came from. So I wish I could join you in the we're only going to talk about the law piece, but I think we do have to bring in why this law is even on the books, why we're even having this conversation. And at the end of the day, I can guarantee you, everybody's given this when they come join the band, and they're asked to review it, and they're given Hart's number and Steve's number and told to call with any questions. So to feign naivete and lack of knowledge of what is, I mean, it's all really clear. Section 4, prohibited conflicts of interest, and it goes straight at no official shall engage in any business that is incompatible with the proper discharge of the official's official duties in the public interest that may tend to impair the official's independence, judgment, or action in the performance of such duties. And I gotta say, I'm really pleased that Councilmember Hubler recused himself today. It was the first time. It is the first time he's ever recused from these conversations. And as we all know from reading Elrod Friedman's memo, under the state law, he never should have been in here ever when we were discussing anything related to liquor. He's already broken the law several times. And again, I'm not saying it was intentional at all. But I am going to say this. I think it's naive to think that having a conflict of interest prohibition related to the sale of liquor is archaic. We have all kinds of regulations to address conflicts of interest, but we particularly want to look at the liquor sales because they are so ripe for opportunity. I have several examples. I don't want to get into finger pointing. I don't want to get into saying you screwed this up, this, but I'm telling you, we are only here because several people, residents, brought up their concerns about conflicts of interest because our colleague failed to recuse himself and failed to comply with state law.
Excuse me, Mayor, I'm sorry, but first of all, these several nameless features, first of all, we have several people who signed letters saying that they feel that this letter is archaic. It doesn't change anything. I'm glad someone brought it up to you, but frankly,
No,
I
many
can't
people.
imagine that council would not have advised. I agree with you, it was purely naivete at the meeting 2 weeks ago. But on any types of incentives or anything else, he had been advised that this was not a conflict unless it directly impacted his business.
Who advised? Who told? Who?
Council,
You did?
no,
Who did? Our corporation council advised them?
in initial meetings. So,
Um,
not during your session, Yumi.
Oh, I was gonna say, I
No.
was in the.
Then recusal was only basically discussed.
So this was a separate meeting specific
Yes.
to, I have a
There was a
liquor
s-
license, and he was told it's okay, don't recuse? I can't
He was
believe
told
that.
to err on the side of business involvement because that's why he was elected. I'll give you the language, if you'll excuse me for 1 minute.
I'm so confused. All right, you look it up, and we're going to keep moving, I believe.
Well, I'll just say, Mayor.
Excuse me, I have it right here. I discussed recusal multiple times with council, in particular in the orientation with Hart and Yumi. There was a brief discussion, but there was a much more detailed discussion pre or post one of the city council meetings upstairs in late May. One of the comments was made, which stuck with me, was that I should not be recusing myself just because we're talking about something business related unless it directly impacted my company, Ravinia Brewing, or BWB Shakes. He said I was elected because I'm an expert in those things and that people want to hear what I have to say and want my expertise on those topics. He said it was clear that I should not be recusing myself when it came to business incentives.
I object to this, Mayor. This is indirectly making a statement by somebody who is recused. This statement of Mr. Hubler is
Shouldn't be in
presented
here.
at our city council in violation of his mandatory recusal.
Well,
And that's why I consider the recusal aspect of this law to be the fundamental basis for the law and why this is not an archaic law. Because you're bringing in his comment indirectly to a meeting he's recused from, because he has spent this entire week lobbying people in contravention of his obligation to be uninvolved in this process. He isn't prohibited from casual contact like that, but he is prohibited by recusal and from participation in official business, which is what we are doing now. And that's why I think the issue of licensure is not archaic. You are indirectly achieving what he is prohibited from doing, and that's not proper.
Well, two things. First, so I just did want to respond because you asked me to
Sure.
read it. I wasn't planning on doing that, council member. I have to be
I don't
honest
care
with
if you
you.
want to give an
You clearly
indirect comment,
brought
but
it
reading
in
his
as an
statement
Well,
is
no,
not
but you
appropriate.
asked me the question, so I'm going to respond to you.
All right.
But again, this is why I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, and just
You may wish all night to not go down that rabbit hole, but if ethics brought us to this conversation, I'm sorry. Ethics are going to be part of this conversation.
okay.
I hope that's clear, and I'll say that all night. I'm sorry. That's where we are. I know you had more you wanted to say. I think the city manager and the corporation council have something they want to say, and Mr. Tapia, you're next.
Mayor, the question of ethics did arise when we, if you recall, in 2023, we were talking about business incentives. And the question was if, just a hypothetical, if there is a business owner that serves on the city council that potentially could benefit from an incentive, where we're talking about new incentives, should that elected official recuse themselves? So according to our ethics guidelines that we have, that issue, unless it's specific to, we're talking about an application before them where they'd be receiving a grant, for example, they would not have to recuse themselves from that type of business incentive. The issue arose at the last committee of the whole meeting, specifically when we were talking about liquor licenses, and the question of ethics came up again, and then that's when I asked Corporation Counsel, can you review the specific issue pertaining to liquor license laws? And as you stated before, liquor license, there's more regulations pertaining to liquor than just general business representation. And so that's how that's I think what brought us here, because it was the liquor
Specific.
license,
Right,
local law.
but I'm
and
just
state
saying
law
the
that
other
arose.
incentives and everything
Yeah.
else, that's why it's okay.
Corporation council.
Mayor, I want to just respond as well, and I appreciate the manager's clarification. I cannot, as a matter of the ethical rules that apply to lawyers, disclose the contents of a privileged communication that we have between an individual member of this council as it relates to their council service. So I'm not going to get into that. I would extend the same, of course, to each of you and senior staff. That's all part of our duties as the city's corporation council. I will note, and consistent with the manager's statement, that the statement that was read tonight, those related to general discussions of a variety of topics, and it is true that as a general rule, that it is our position, and you've all heard me or Corporation Counsel Elrod say this, that you are elected to participate in policy discussions as a general rule. I will not say anything further about whether and to what extent we discuss anything more specific than that, but there is a distinction between a advice on general discussions and advice on perhaps specific applications, and how those may relate to each of you individually.
Thank you. Okay. Did you want to finish with your statement, or do you
I
want to?
think we should move on, and then I can go over to that too. Thank you.
Okay. Andres?
Yeah, a few things. I just want to go back to one of your opening comments, Mayor, where you talked about, I think in response to, it wasn't an open response to a Councilmember Littlewer about the number of jurisdictions that have, rescinded this code. And you said it was very few in relation to the majority of the municipalities around us. That, I just want to say that is not seem like a sound reason to not have us consider rescinding it. And particularly because, Mayor, you have taken a lot of pride in the city of Highland Park being a leading city in things ahead of the majority of municipalities around us, like the assault weapons ban, like, driving while, speaking on
Using
a
cell
cell phone
phones.
while driving. and other things. You've taken pride in being the first. So I think that's not a valid argument in this discussion, and especially on the basis of what you have taken pride in the city being a leading edge. And I think we have an opportunity to look at this in a progressive way, and what would lead to business development. And I would call it an archaic law, and it gets in the way of us tapping into a talent pool of leaders in this community, which includes business leaders, to be able to have the opportunity to serve our city. And that is the rationale that the state of Illinois accepted when they gave the ability for us to rescind this code, because there was recognition that it would limit the leadership pool for people that want to serve the city as well, just because they had a liquor license. So that's one aspect here I wanted to address. Regarding some of the legal stuff, and I'm not going to approach this as a lawyer because I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding, Council Hart, was Councilmember Hubler in violation of municipal Highland Park code in terms of conflict of interest when we were discussing some of the things we did around some of our liquor code?
As a general statement, I think if we're talking about the discussion about general city liquor policy,
Yeah.
I would say that there was not a violation of ethics guidelines in the broadest sense. I think that's true. I think as we get more specific, I'm not prepared to issue an opinion on that here tonight, but the very general, that there is a state law issue that's been discussed already tonight, but the city, I would say, very generally, discussions are not a concern.
Okay, so then the other thing I'm wondering is, we're holding a high bar for Councilmember Hubler on sort of should have seen this, should have seen that, should have clicked on that. Okay, it's fair enough, but then the city staff did not catch this, and I think we should hold them accountable. The general counsel that we pay to represent our interests did not catch it. And whose signature is on the liquor license that was granted to Councilmember Hubler?
That's mine, but it is based on an administrative review, and that's where we are.
Or where's your excuse though? Didn't you know the law? Why are we holding Councilmember Hubler at a higher standard that we hold you as a signatory of the liquor license?
One could say an error was made.
But he swore or affirmed that he was eligible for the liquor license on the very form.
I mean,
So
he
you
did.
trusted that he did that?
He correctly signed his
Correctly.
affirmation statement.
An error was made.
Doesn't mean you need to change the law. That's the thing. We have case law that shows that when errors were made, licenses could have been revoked. Based on the law right now, his license could be revoked. I have no interest in revoking his license, let me be really clear. But let me also tell you that at the moment, we have a legal decision to make. We're going to have that conversation. And I want to share with you, your comment about all the cities that have or haven't taken the step to change the law. There is, again, misinformation. I have received emails that have said, we are the only city in the state that still has this archaic law on our books.
We're not making that case, Mayor.
No, I'm just clarifying, because fortunately, we are having a public conversation because we embrace transparency and we want the public to better understand what happened and how we got here, why this is a problem, and how we're going to endeavor to address it.
But
So
I
I
still
just want
believe
to,
we
I
have
just
to-
want to be clear that that was a misstatement, and when I was asked what misinformation is out there, this is one piece of misinformation that is out there. Here are 42 cities and 8 who have chosen to change the law, and 42 who have chosen to keep the law, and some have changed it by adding cannabis licenses.
Well, I'd like to make one more point that I
Sure.
think I want to keep separate the conflict of interest discussion and the validity of this ordinance that prevents us accessing and having, opportunity for leaders in this community who happen to run a restaurant, who happen to have a liquor license, to forbid them from being able to serve the city of Highland Park, in which the state of Illinois agreed with the wisdom of that and has given us the permission, if we so willfully wanted to do it, to allow that barrier to be rescinded. And that is, on its own merits, I think it should be considered tonight on its own merits, independent of the situation of Councilmember Hubler.
1,000%, and that's why we put it on the agenda. We could have easily said, wow, we screwed up, on with business, see you next time. But no, we said, you know what, we found this out, this is an issue, this is on our books, we have questions, let's have this unbelievable conversation. It's been quite a couple of weeks, and it's really unfortunate that we got here. I thought the context of how the question was asked was important, and now we're going to ask the question this evening, is it something that you want to do as a council to change the law? So we will have that conversation. Appreciate it. I don't know if your hand was up before Kim's, but I'm happy to have you jump in. If you guys, you and me go first? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and
Please talk into your microphone so people can hear you, because we got folks in the other room.
I want to clarify one thing, that we did, Councilmember Hubler and I got training, we got orientation from different departments and from Corporation Council. And I want to clarify that what Hart said, I recall, frankly, I wasn't paying as much attention as I might have if I knew we were going to have this discussion. But I recall the general gist of it being that, as a general policy, yes, we would expect you as a business person to have some thoughts about business. But that's the extent of it. I just don't remember anything more specific than that. And I wanted to ask I'm sorry, still an issue. I have put my thoughts together. Of course, I'm waiting for this discussion as well, and I think it's really important to have this discussion. I've put my thoughts together, and I was thinking that I would read it when we have the vote, but I'm not sure if the expectation is that we're reading it during this meeting or not.
It's whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you feel is important to this conversation. I will be sharing mine again at the council meeting.
I have a couple of the questions. One, well, to be perfectly honest, and this is true honesty here, you had not received an email or any form of communication from me, phone call about it, so I was not the trigger for the look into the issue. I was concerned about Councilmember Hubler weighing in on alcohol licenses during that meeting, but I had not spoken to anybody about this, and you will not be able to find any evidence of it because I didn't do that. I wasn't the trigger. The question I have was back to, and I'm not really sure how important this is, but back to the affidavit that was signed, and I'm sorry to revisit it, but I'm trying to just clarify for my own mind that it wasn't Councilmember Hubler that signed that affidavit, right? But it was incumbent upon him. He was part of the.
The affidavit speaks for all of the directors, managers,
speaks for all of
owners.
them, right?
And I believe he did the one in 22 for the 23 license.
21, I think, for 22. That's the first one that I saw.
Which wouldn't have made a difference because he hadn't been elected, so that wasn't an issue.
Right, he hadn't been elected.
But,
No, I understand that it regardless of whether he signed it or not, it applies to him. And, but the question was, sorry for you to repeat it, but that in signing that, was it triggered that, I'm not clear about that, triggered the rules about why he was being asked that question.
on the application
On
it
the
asks,
application, it
is anybody,
is.
the
right.
person who filled out that application answered the question.
He did answer the question
He did answer the
correctly.
question
He-
correctly.
Yes.
Right.
But you were talking about
He answered one
information that
correctly.
comes to you, explaining why. That,
Correct.
Yeah.
This issue has not arisen before
Yeah.
in my experience working in local government. And so, in looking at that question, from my perspective at staff, it seemed more of a disclosure rather than a code requirement.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what we're doing now, moving forward, if the law continues to be on the books, we are going to, on all of our applications for these questions that tie back to a code provision, we are going to take that code provision and make sure it's part of the application, so it's a flag. So it's beyond just a yes or no. If someone answers yes or no,
Yeah,
it's gonna
yeah.
pull up, this is why we're asking this question.
Yeah.
And so for me or my successors, it'll be a red flag moving forward on every application
Yeah,
that people
thank you
complete.
for clarifying. Yeah, and I do have a statement to read, but I'm going to wait for the right moment for that.
And I think it's important to note, in the ethics guidelines, there are other prohibitions about participating on city commissions and so forth, again, due to possible conflicts of interest. So it's not solely this is this one place, but this is something that is part of what we stand for as a city, trying to make sure that those who are providing public service are doing it independently of their own private interests, or those of their clients, or whatever the case may be. I have Kim, then Andres, then Tony,
Thank you.
and then Annette.
City Manager Newkirk, how many advisory groups, boards, and commissions do we have in Highland Park?
18.
18. So the city council is not the only place in which a business owner, a restaurant owner, someone who holds a liquor license can be involved and can participate and provide input. There's no prohibition on serving on one of these advisory groups, boards, or commissions if you hold a liquor license. Right? There's only a prohibition of serving on the council and holding a liquor license. Is that right?
Well, that's true.
A law enforcement question.
If you want to ask Hart.
Hart.
I am not aware of another prohibition on participation by, where is this?
So it's any law enforcing public official, so any law enforcing public official, any member of the city council who has direct or indirect interest in the manufacture, sale, or distribution of alcoholic liquor in the city by the applicant. So no, somebody with a liquor license could certainly participate, from my reading, on a city commission.
I wanna-
So we
yeah,
have,
I- yeah, I
so
wanna-
we have the Business and Economic Development Advisory Group, for instance, which would be an excellent place for somebody who has a liquor license, who has a business, to be providing input on business development and how we can improve things in that regard. So this is not the only place where that can happen. The other thing is, someone had mentioned, I think Councilmember Tapia mentioned that this was a high bar. And yeah, it's a high bar. To serve on the city council, we have this ethics ordinance that's, I don't know how many pages long, that we have read. We have other requirements that we have to meet in order to serve on the city council. Former council members have recused themselves, and current council members have recused themselves from conversations multiple times because of our ethics ordinance and because of their own personal ethics. I recall a previous council member who recused because he worked at a law firm, and the law firm had previously represented the parent company of a group that was building something in Highland Park. And so it was a pretty far stretch, but he wanted to be absolutely clear that there was no conflict. Yeah, it's a high bar, but I think it's a high bar on purpose because we are, as the mayor said, serving the public. And we need to make sure that that is our primary focus and our only focus, and we're not serving our own personal business interests or anything else. So I think that that's appropriate.
Andres?
Yeah, I just want to comment on Councilmember Stone's comment, then I have a couple questions. I would be careful to, limit the aspirations of residents of Highland Park who happen to have a liquor license and say that they should be content enough to find another place to serve when their aspiration might be to serve on city council. I find that to be pretty patronizing and not appropriate. Now, I have a question. What was the question on the liquor license application regarding whether one is serving or not? What is the exact question?
Any change in circumstance?
Is an elected public official or law enforcement officer directly or indirectly involved in the applicant's business?
And that's a question that the applicant has to answer, right?
Yeah.
And what was council member's answer to that?
Yes.
Yes.
So he was truthful.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is that regarding this recusal aspect, I recognize, because I had to face it like everybody else does, and we have to be discerning. You know, there is a learning curve. You know, when you come into this, I came with no municipal experience. You stumble around for a little bit. You depend on the good graces of the people around you who have been here 12, 16, 20, 25 years. It was no secret. It was known to everybody that Jeff Hubler was a co-owner of Ravinia Brewing. When he was in this room trying to participate as the elected official just to represent the interests of the city who wanted a small business owner's voice in the city of Highland Park, he did his duty. And he spoke and he gave some helpful things. And nobody here, legal counsel, the mayor, the members of the liquor committee, the city staff member, was able to say, hey, time out for the protection of everybody here. Let's take a recess and let's figure out if this is the right place. We are holding a new, he's not even 1 year in the office. And we have people here who have been 20, 25 years as municipal leaders elected. And none of you spoke up to defend our city and protect him from a naive mistake that he maybe potentially was making. And furthermore, you said earlier that at least in terms of municipal code, you, in your legal opinion, do not even feel that he was doing conflict of interest. So why are we having this discussion now when we're trying to look at code that seems archaic, that is getting in the way of us being more economically vibrant, which is the city of Highland Park has told us, the residents have told us they want to see happen. And particularly when we're starting to make some progress collectively, I think this is getting in the way when we have a way out by the state of Illinois that says this is how you can resolve this dilemma.
Who wants to answer that, or is that just a statement? I mean, we all agree that we want to move forward with business development. And none of us thinks that this was done intentionally. But at the end of the day, you have to have that compass that says to you, am I serving the public or am I serving my business? And that apparently was not something that came to mind. That's why we're here.
And nobody else has accountability for this. It all falls on him.
I mean, I take accountability. Yeah, I apologize. I did not look at the code to know that this provision, when I looked at that application, in my opinion, it looked like more disclosure versus a code provision. I apologize for that, and we took immediate steps to make sure that in all of our, I mean, we're looking at building permits, we're looking at special event permits, every single permit application you're gonna apply for the city, we're gonna go through the code and make sure that these questions are tied back to a specific code provision. So that's how we are addressing this moving forward. But I'll tell you that this arose based on just the dialogue that we had at the last committee of the whole meeting, which several people questioned, and then that's what I talked to Corporation Counsel and just said, can you dive into this and can you look at our local and state laws and see if there's a conflict of interest? So that's kind of the background.
I think we're all accountable, by the way, not just one person. We're all accountable. And why are we making one person pay for our collective failure?
Hence this conversation. Tony and then Annette.
So, in my investigation of the liquor law that we're addressing, you can't really separate ethics from the law since the recusal provision remains regardless of what we do. And the recusal provision highlights the reason that we put this special burden on the owners of liquor licenses, that they cannot serve in an elected position in city government. It eliminates the temptation for inappropriate conduct, for close conduct. It is a separate issue from owning a business. And although this is really beyond the point, it's been brought up, about how can we have business owners participate in city growth. Of all of the municipalities that are frequently cited as growing, Winnetka, which often is identified to me by colleagues and friends as the restaurant capital of the North Shore, of Northbrook and others of our immediate neighbors, only one has this exception, and the others don't, and yet they continue to have restaurants come in. We continue to have restaurants come in. We continue to have businesses come in. There's no prohibition against a business owner serving on the city council. This is unique to the possessor of a liquor license, which is a very small population in Highland Park. And because it's a controlled substance, and because this controlled substance is potentially contrary to the health and welfare of residents at large, the state in larger municipalities flatly refuses it and has left it to smaller municipalities to decide whether to refuse or accept liquor licenses being granted to city council members. Many municipalities haven't considered it because they may not have considered the need to address it. Of the few that have, none have eliminated the recusal provision, which says that the ethical issue underlying the possession of a liquor license while serving on the city council exists. To me, the one thing that should be changed is the enforcement provision. Typically, we enforce our laws when there's a complaint. We don't go out looking for violations. Members of the Liquor Control Board, Liquor Control Commission in the City of Highland Park, of which I'm one, as you're aware, we don't hunt out violators of our liquor laws. We address complaints that have been raised independently, either by the police department through underage sales, or potentially in this circumstance, somebody might be brought to us for a potential violation and an action based upon that violation. But it is not our job, it is not my job, it is not anybody's job to go out and look for violations. In the time that I've served on the city council, and I'm now in my 4th term, every recusal has been voluntary. There probably have been some mistakes by my colleagues over the years that we either haven't noticed or for one reason or another were temporary or overlooked. But for the most part, we are scrupulous in recusing ourselves and avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. So while everybody has some responsibility in this, ultimately personal responsibility, the applicant's responsibility in applying for a liquor license is the preliminary responsibility. And although the question about whether Councilmember Hubler was on the city council when that application was completed was answered truthfully, the affidavit below it, which affirms that there were no conflicts with automatic denial, that was signed in error. And that speaks for Mr. Hubler and the rest of the principals in that business. And that's what we're addressing.
Annette? Okay, so several points, not in any special order. I'm going to leave my comments for the city council meeting, like the two of you. So a couple of things. First of all, I'm sorry, but as a first-generation American, I find it absolutely offensive to think that someone could not run for office if they've met the residency requirements and the age requirements as set out by law. And to take one class of people and discriminate against them in some way to prevent them from running, to me, is beyond offensive. And it's not sufficient to say, oh, you can be a commissioner. People work very hard to get into public office, and they serve and spend a lot of time doing it. And I don't think we or anybody else has the right to take that away, assuming those things have been done. So I'm sorry, but that particular comment really bothers me. There are mistakes made by everybody, and I take full responsibility. We certified the election. So if we keep this law as it is, we certified the election of someone who was a liquor license holder and should have either revoked that license at the same time or shouldn't certified his election. So the electorate may have spoken, but we as a city, and I don't know who certifies the elections on behalf of the city. I know the Board of Elections has some in it.
County does it.
The county does it, but then the city, I thought, has to also sign too.
We just accept them and then we send them to the county.
To the
Okay,
county.
well,
So that
I'm
was
just
like
saying,
county.
when we just say blame all the way around, it's whether it's county, city, all of us, it's fine.
But you do recognize that there's nothing that prohibits a person from running for office. There is no rule in any of this that talks about removing them from office. It
Correct.
strictly addresses their ability to hold a liquor license.
However, if that is their livelihood, we are asking them to make that kind of a choice. So you're correct.
But I
There-
wanna
I
be
don't want the
clear.
misinformation. We are
No.
not kicking
No.
Councilmember Hubler off.
No.
However, we can impact tremendously. And frankly, Mayor, one of the best things I heard tonight is that you do not plan under the Liquor License Commission to revoke that license. I think that's wonderful. Because frankly, I was going to say to you, there are 2 or 3 different ways we can do all of this. Number one, we can pass this law and this amendment and have the protections that the state affords us. And now that we're all on notice, we make sure that there's recusal, whether that's in meetings or votes, and we really, whether it's council, peers, staff, or the member, him or herself, they really follow the letter of the law, which should have been done all along. But we make it less draconian so that it's not an either or in terms of having your liquor license. So that's one path. And then we can also speak to Councilmember Hubler, whether it's through the Liquor License Commission, because we feel that there has been a conflict, or whether it's through the ethics, through the city, to have a hearing on behavior and what should occur going forward for all of us, because I think it's a learning process, frankly, for all of us. I want to make sure I don't do anything wrong. So I think that's a great way of doing it. I also think that by leaving the current statute, or the current ordinance, in place, we just legalized marijuana shops in our town. It's a very strictly regulated industry. We don't have a prohibition that someone who's the partner or the manager of the marijuana store doesn't have a conflict. They're not being prohibited. We are only singling out those with liquor licenses. So frankly, that's something I would like to explore in terms of whether under state law, we make sure the good people of Highland Park are protected from those people that might have a conflict because they have a marijuana license. Took a long time to get to that point to make it so that we were comfortable having those stores, but how do we know that someone doesn't run for city council, has the right to do so, but we're not saying to them, well, we're gonna have to revoke your license here, we're only doing it with alcohol? These are sort of the vices that we as a city, we've put into place so many safeguards to make sure that we protect people. So why are we singling out this one particular group? I actually, by now, I really do feel it's been a crazy couple weeks that I've memorized the state statute. So I really do believe that between recusal and all the things that are in the state law, should we repeal, in other words, should we accept this amendment tonight, the good people of Highland Park and everybody else will be fully protected. And I really feel that those conflicts will be straightforward. And frankly, Corporation Council may get so excited about Highland Parks doing it that they go to their other clients and say, hey, you know what? This is something that's been there for a long time. Maybe we consider doing it with them too. In any event, I think I had marijuana laws. I think that takes me through those commissions, and my other statements I'll be happy to make during the city council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. I know in the proposed language for amending the city statute, you had asked us to remove the language regarding recusal. Why?
Because I wanted it to be more all-encompassing, and I was afraid that if we only highlight that one passage in talking with Corporation Counsel, he and I decided that we wanted to use the full body of the law, which is why I ended the sentence at the citation, comma,
Having it
as
refer to
amended.
the state law and not in
Oh, it's
terms
not
of-
to make it narrower, it was to make sure we embodied the entire state law with regard to that
Okay.
portion.
And then, just to share with you, you highlighted that we don't have the same regulation for cannabis license holders, but I did share with you that several of those who are looking at this law have not only kept it on the books, but have added cannabis license.
Right.
So that may be a conversation.
I
Depending
actually
on
think it
which way
should be a
things are going.
That's the whole point. I think we should discuss some of these things, but I also think that as far as regulation in terms of alcohol and marijuana, cigarettes, all these things, the state really, they take it at their level, and then we, with home rule, we do what we want at our level. But I want us to discuss it and determine whether, in fact, we are inhibiting our own ability to let full members of our community participate because it's such a narrow wording.
Tony?
I just want to express a very brief concern about eliminating the proposed language that Councilmember Littler is talking about. And I understand her intention. My problem is by removing that language, you potentially revert only to the state's ability to enforce recusal. It could be read that way. It may not be intended that way, but it could be read that way. And I would not, if this law is amended tonight, I would not want to lose the opportunity within the city of Highland Park to be able to insist on a recusal.
I have no problem whatsoever. If we decide to change this to add the language back in, Corporation Counsel was fine with it. He thought it was broader the way I did it, and I was just trying to make it as broad as possible to capture any type of problem. But if you're more comfortable and that gets you to the point that we can amend this ordinance, I have no problem with it at all.
I understood, and I had that conversation with Corporation Counsel, and he affirmed exactly what you've said.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anybody? Yes? You?
Adding to that, I agree that I'd like the language to remain in. I'd like to be as specific as possible about recusals. Well, maybe there's a way, I'd like to double and triple,
Double
whatever.
suspender.
Yeah, redundancy, whatever.
That would be absolutely fine.
The other thing is that the amendment and the resolution that is on the agenda, and maybe this is a legal issue about which I don't know anything, doesn't have language about recusal. So what I saw didn't, but maybe it's been updated to have language about.
There was an email sent around that Councilmember Littler wanted to remove that portion that says
Okay, but so
governing recusal.
the
from
one that
vote.
we're voting on tonight, it does have language about?
Yes.
It does,
The language.
No, it has
that
mine.
was
Not
provided-
amended, it says governing, I'll just read the whole thing. Any law enforcing public official or any member of the city council with a direct or indirect interest in the manufacture, sale, or distribution of alcoholic liquor to whom a local liquor license is issued must strictly comply with the provisions of section 6-2, parentheses 14, of the Illinois Liquor Control Act governing recusal from voting and from participating in meetings, hearings, or discussions on matters impacting the manufacture, sale, or distribution of alcoholic.
I would say if we go with that though, Mayor, could we please add as amended so that if and when the state law changes, we will still be up to code on it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You want it to
Just-
reflect back to the state without any question.
Yes.
This, just for reference, this was an email I sent to the city council Saturday, so it included Councilmember Littler's proposal, and then what the ordinance that's on the agenda, and then how it's drafted as amended.
Can I clarify for Councilmember Ross
Sure.
why in fact I did that?
Sure.
Under the law, Councilmember Ross, when you specifically set a part of it, then that part is definitely determined as being covered. If you refer to the entire statute, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the discussion that I had with Council Elrod, not council member. But if you refer to the citation of the statute, then everything that's in that statute, every prohibition, every recusal, meetings, let's say we forgot one word in there, it would be covered. And we wanted to do it as broadly as possible. So that's the only reason I commented on it,
Okay, great. Any further comments?
to make good law.
I mean, just to indicate, my preference,
Oh,
I-
sorry.
you
Yes,
know,
go ahead.
I agree that that we should retain some language around recusal, because it is serious. And, I know there's a little bit of debate about how broad or narrow it should be, but I would support the one that would have a majority support here, so that we can really look at the merits of rescinding the antiquated part of this ordinance.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? We have so many exciting things to talk about on Second Street lighting.
Yay.
we have time?
Yes.
Okay. For those of you who came to discuss liquor control, we are now moving on to lights on Second Street. We will be back discussing liquor control at 7:30. So you're welcome to hang around to hear about the new lights on Second Street, or if you have a life and want to go get food, we will see you at 7:30. Go get some water if you would like, yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're going to kick off our lights, and if we don't finish them, we'll be back after the city council meeting.
Can we just take like a?
We only have
informal
15 minutes,
poll?
and then we're going to
Right, informal-
break for dinner.
No, informal poll of who wants which lights.
Who wants lights?
Who wants
Oh,
which lights?
okay.
because
Do
maybe
you need
we'll
us
move it
to take a
forward.
poll about,
VDOT.
Gita, do you need us to talk about which light we like?
Need to open it up.
Or do you want to
Whatever-
have?
There is a presentation we have
Because we've seen
planned.
this presentation
We've seen this
already.
presentation.
Okay, if you wanted to, just go through.
And by the way, those renderings really accelerated the process.
Yeah.
So we should
Okay.
take advantage of that.
For sure, yeah, thank you.
So quickly, four questions that we have for council. Light pole model, bollard model, decorative lights, and whether or not to move the bump out near Central
So maybe do we
Avenue
want
one
to
space.
just pause right here?
Yeah.
Do you want to just stop here? Or,
Let's
we
do a
have
straw poll,
images and
right?
everything, but if you're prepared for feedback, we can.
Let's throw the pictures up,
Yep,
just,
I do.
Yeah.
Yep, we do have some
I've not memorized
additional
which is
images.
Alcott versus
Yeah.
Providence.
Give me a statue, don't give me a lamp pole.
Uh-oh.
While we're hanging around talking about lights, Andres, I want to let you know, I talked to somebody, the ghost light question you had about the lack of lenses is part of the dark sky compliance. So when they have the lens, when they have the glass, it upshines the light. So that's, I know you and I have talked
But
about those
doesn't
ghost
glare
lights
out.
forever, but yeah, that's what that's all about, is dark sky compliance. We
You know,
can
this
see
is a good
the-
design problem for the engineers to kind of fake something.
Exactly,
It can be compliant and not look ghost-like, right?
right, right.
Now that he said that, I always think of it when I look up, but it didn't bother me
It's like the light
before.
that has no light, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
once you
Joel?
say it, you see it, yeah, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I just want to start off here, and this is the central, this is the bump out closest to Central. BYG is on the left, and Gearhead's on the right. So you can see here, based on the original schematics for the location, where its proximity would be relative to those two buildings. Of course, buildings could change, entrances could change, all that, but this is the current situation. This shows you with that bump out, that same bump out, moved one space to the north. So let me try that again. It's a little bit like going to the eye doctor, before or after, better, worse, better, worse.
One
Okay,
or two.
So there's the first one from the schematics. This is moved one space to the north. So more of that outdoor seating will be in front of a active facade, we'll say, the BYG glass. There is a door there. It's a secondary door, admittedly, but nonetheless, that's the difference. So one space, one
Wait,
space.
can you go back to one
Yep.
for a minute? Now I'm confused.
Okay, you can see how we're further towards Central here,
I would think you'd
and
want to
then
be more
you're up
proximate to the rest.
more toward BYG here.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Yes.
please move
One
it.
north? Who's
Okay.
in favor of that? One north?
This one?
Yes.
Yes.
More
Okay.
proximate to the restaurants.
All right, great.
Okay. Oh, by the way, Jeff can come in for this
Oh.
conversation?
Okay, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, hold on.
Do you want me to go through that? Time for
Actually, I do have a question while we wait.
Yeah.
Going back to the ghost light concern I have, this rendering shows the light on during the day. But it's not gonna be on during the day.
No.
No.
So will that look ghost-like, this particular style?
Doesn't have glass.
No,
Doesn't have
this
glass.
one
It'll be
doesn't look
ghost-like.
like a ghost.
But
I've
how do you
seen
know?
this- I've seen
Make
this
your
one.
peace with it.
Yeah?
Glass.
This one, but the revision ones look like.
So here's,
No, this one's better.
There
so
are
this
some
is
in
what
the
it
video.
is.
I've seen them, they're a little
Councilmember.
weird looking.
The
There it
ghost
is.
lights,
It's
yes.
that one. It's that one. It
They
doesn't
work
look-
nicely, but they
It
do,
doesn't look like a
yeah.
ghost.
Yeah,
And
because
this-
of the-
No, it's because it's got the
Yeah.
slats going on.
Yeah, I think that the
It's
thicker
different.
supporting arms kind of mitigate against
Think so?
that.
I think
I
that-
do.
okay.
But I see what you're saying. Once you say it, you start to see it, like you were
Now I
talking
can't
about. Right.
stop.
Okay, so back to where we were.
Okay,
back
so
to the two
Alcott
pictures.
versus, what was the other one?
Alcott versus Providence. So let's go through that. Okay. Oh, Councilmember Huber's here. just for Councilmember Hubler's benefit. So we had, our original schematic showed the bump out closest to Central at this location roughly in front of Gearhead to the right and BYG to the left. Staff was asking for feedback and council resoundingly said they thought it was best to do the following. Moving it one space to the north gets more of the bump out in front of BYG, but it also still has a significant portion in front of Gearhead. These are existing facades. They can change. Buildings can change, facades can change, entryways and all that, so just keep that in mind. But with this change, you get more glass and an entrance toward BYG. Admittedly, it's the secondary entrance, however, or secondary egress.
What's your thought?
Council seemed to like this.
Just in terms of this?
Yeah.
Just in
Yeah,
terms of this.
moving it, I think, closer to BYG, even the secondary entrance, they'll use that for serving space, so I would think that would be a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And just to reflect on the main questions that we had for council tonight, light pole model, bollard model, decorative lighting, and bump out location. So we started with the last first there. Okay. So back to where we were. So that's one space to the north. Okay. So these are different perspectives. Okay. So this is a day option with the Alcott Hawthorne combination of street light and bollard. That's the day, night, obviously. There's the look and feel of that. Providence and Richmond.
I can't see that.
And Alcott and Hawthorne in View B. So this is the closest to Central Avenue. Now we go up north along 2nd toward Elm, near New York Slices and Potbelly, a different bump out. There's one of 3. And so this is here the Alcott Hawthorne combo, and at night. Really does look quite attractive at night. You see some of the decorative lighting, we'll get to that in a moment, but in the background there, the cantonary lights. View B, option 2, it's Providence and Richmond. Providence and Richmond, night. Providence and Lincoln in the day. And I will tell you that just staff's opinion on this is that the bollards seem awfully bulky.
Yeah.
They just do.
Yeah.
This is a lot more refined and attractive, at least in staff's opinion, respectfully. So that's the Providence and Lincoln. And again, we mentioned the bulkiness. Okay, now further north along 2nd toward Elm, you got Michael's on the right there, you could see. And so this shows this different part of the streetscape here. Okay, just to show you what these look like in the sidewalk. There are no bump outs proposed in this area north of the 2nd Street parking lot. Okay, and there's a night version. Okay. The outdoor seating is movable tables and chairs as part of the project, have not been yet selected, but nonetheless just show you in this context. Okay,
Yeah, quick question.
Yeah.
So are the bollards proposed only where the bump outs are?
correct,
Okay,
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Okay.
correct.
yeah.
Yeah, to delineate and for safety. They are not impact collision tested, but nonetheless, they do provide that visual buffer, and there is a 6-inch curb and such that will be
For
incorporated.
Michael's, can we put in more planters then, or how, I mean, people are parking right next to people sitting, eating, I'm concerned safety-wise.
We could put in additional planters, Mayor, yes. If that's what council would like to see, absolutely. And then moving to the decorative lighting, okay.
Wait, excuse me.
Yep.
Yeah, let's vote.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we can get on.
Okay, sure.
Too much
Wanna
stuff,
do lights,
right?
or do you wanna do?
Absolutely.
okay.
Lights, let's do lights first.
Lights.
Providence, right?
Yep.
Those are our choices?
Yes.
Could I just ask for can you zoom in for the Providence for 1 second, please? I mean, is
I
there
think Providence is more like old time.
traditional?
Here, let me try something, Ashley, just before you do that. Do you want to zoom in the rendering, or do you want to just see the luminaire? Because I have a shot of the luminaire.
Just for second, or are we also gonna move these all over the central business district?
The idea would be that they could be a model for the rest of the central business district along these types of ways, okay? So Central Avenue is a different type of way, a classification of street, than these side streets like
So
Second and First and things like that.
Sheridan, east of the tracks, which is
That
more of
too.
a Tudor kind of building feeling
Right.
versus these are sort of Okay.
So I could just show you quickly, and then, we can zoom into the
Different
renderings
use
if
to
you'd
the
like.
specs and West
But
End.
here's what they, so here's the Alcott, and here's the Providence model. What you're looking at there is just the luminaire portion that would be placed on the pole.
Okay.
And then you could see these are different, not anywhere in Highland Park, but these are other pictures from other installations, what they look like.
Thank you.
To me, it's night and day, so to speak.
For sure, nice.
Yeah, we do have
So that-
those.
Well, that, I mean, the Alcott is clearly, I mean, heads and tails, in my opinion, the better design, and whether it's for Second Street or whether we're repeating it, on other streets. And I said it in a previous committee of the whole meeting that, it's modern, but it alludes slightly to, more traditional form as opposed to just a cylinder. And we're trying to look, on the whole, more innovative and not retro. So that's my feeling. I just wanted to say that from the get-go. I guess we're going to get to the bollards after this,
Yes,
right?
we are. Only doing
Okay.
lights.
Okay.
So
So
this
you
is
are
the
on both
street
for
lights.
Alcott.
Yep.
Kim and then Andre.
I completely agree. I think the Alcott really gives us a better updated look. And and I know we're only doing lights, but the Hawthorne, to me, the combo, because you had it in combination.
Yeah, here we go.
The
bollards with the lights, yep.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Alcott Hawthorne
agreed.
gives an updated look, and to me, a much better design. The other is like pretending to be a horse, thing.
Okay.
Like
Place to
it's
hitch your
a place to
wagon.
hitch your
Okay.
horse, yeah.
Andres and then Annette.
Well, since she went to the bollards, Yumi, you're gonna comment on bollards. Do you have a preference?
Well,
Let's
told,
stick with lights for the moment, please.
Well, she just went to bollards.
I
Because
can't
they're
control her.
presented to me.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because I wanna say
I
Alcott and
agree.
Bollard.
Okay,
I mean,
you wanna go-
Alcott and Hawthorne.
You like Alcott and
I'm
Hawthorne?
in agreement, I just wanna give Yumi the
Same,
chance to do
same.
it.
Bollards?
absolutely the same. It's a really nice look, actually.
Really nice.
I
Okay.
mean, all things.
Kind of goes with the bike racks that we've been moving
Yes,
forward.
it does.
Annette, Jeff, Tony?
So I have a question,
Yes, ma'am?
because I do have what I wanted, but it may not work. Do you all think that, like, to go with the really traditional light, it's then wrong to go with the more modern bollard? I mean, do you think it's wrong to mix and match?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so then I have no problem with the Alcott. I mean, I liked the Providence, but if you don't think that works. But the problem I had was that one of them, I think we need the Richmond because I like the Hawthorne, that's the one I really wanted, but it doesn't have the quick release. And I think the quick release is essential, and that when we told staff originally, we said the one thing we want is quick release. And I wanted the Hawthorne, and it doesn't have a quick release, I believe, but the Richmond was the less bulky of the other two. So I wanted the less bulky
With the
bollard,
quick
but
release.
with a quick release. So I think I needed the Richmond and the Alcott and the Richmond. I don't mean to confuse them more.
So here's
Okay.
a Richmond, let me
Don't
see
they
if.
all have- Don't they all have quick release, Joe?
No, I
No.
think
The Alcott does not come with quick release.
the Alcott,
No.
no, the Alcott is a light.
Excuse me,
We
the
don't want it to
Hawthorne,
release.
sorry, that's my bad, the Hawthorne. The Hawthorne does not.
Sorry.
And there's nothing else
I
that
need a
looks
little
like the
levity.
Hawthorne that has quick release?
And that was my problem. I like the more modern bollard, but it doesn't have quick release, and that is a
I
problem.
can't imagine that there's not another one that looks like that, but that has quick release.
We already asked you to look into that.
We
And
did.
it didn't have it.
You didn't have it, so.
So I'm going Alcott and Richmond.
Please explain the quick release here, because it looked like the tube is permanently there. So how is that helpful?
What do you mean, the tube?
The tube that there's a.
Oh, the tube,
release.
yes, so the tube
Yeah.
is in the ground,
You
and then there's a
remove the
pole,
thing, and the
yeah.
tube remains, I'm not sure what point there is.
So the picture that Councilmember Hubler has.
Yeah.
Quick
looks like the
release
packet
is-
of how it's
yeah.
released.
Right, so that's still in the way.
Still a
It's still
tube.
something.
No,
But
but
it-
that tube that you're talking about, think of it as a sheet that's it's in the ground. It's subsurface and then flush with the ground at top. So you're putting a pole into a sheath and then locking it to that thing. So you can take the pole out and then it's flat, you know, there's
Okay.
there's a
Okay.
hole,
It's
but there's a
flush
cap you
with
put
it.
on
Okay.
it, and then that's the
Okay.
end of
For
that.
events, you know.
Aren't we hand shoveling these areas, though?
But I think we wanted to have sort of ease of movement
Right.
and close the street
Yeah.
to have it
Affairs,
be more
whatever.
welcoming and like not knocking into a bollard as you're going to get some food.
It
So,
still
I'm
needs to
done.
look beautiful. I mean, yeah.
It still needs to look beautiful.
Mhm.
All right, well, okay, so
I don't know where that
Three
leaves
for
us.
Alcott Hawthorne and one Alcott.
one for Alcott Richmond, who am I missing?
And you
Jeff,
got Jeff.
Tony?
So I would,
What are your thoughts?
I would go with the Alcott Hawthorne, but I think we have an excessive number of bollards. I think
That
we
was
can
my next
limit the
point.
number of bollards to make it easier to try to,
Yeah.
for people to get through, but also help with at least a place to sort of plow snow. But I don't know if there's, requirements as to how close they have to be together.
No.
They're not gonna stop cars.
No, this is a decorative
Too
thing,
many
and we
chairs.
want to have the visual, you know, delineation achieved is really all that we're seeking here.
So fewer bollards, but you like the Alcott Hawthorne. Okay,
Okay.
Tony,
I'm okay with that, too.
I'm fine with either one.
You guys have both indicated
Alcott,
Alcott.
Alcott, yeah.
So we've heard from
Hawthorne.
the architect and the business owner. And they
And
agree.
one other question that is that, are the bollards, they don't, they're not impact resistant?
That's
That-
correct.
It sounds like they're decorative.
They're
and it's provide
decorative,
additional lighting.
And so they're defining the space, which does appeal to me, but is it getting in the way of
Movement?
seating? I mean, ability
Oh, I see.
to really, you know, plan
Are
out
you
the seating.
suggesting just
I'm
eliminating
just, I'm
bollards?
wondering, is,
I mean,
Well, I would say perhaps, it's a very good question, because, you know, your seats pulling in and out and things like that. If we reduce the number, as indicated, perhaps by a third, and spread out, distribute the rest, I think you're probably gonna be
Okay.
okay about that.
I think
Yeah.
that's
I
great.
mean, there is some trade-off there, no doubt, but it does provide some nice effect, you know?
sure,
Yeah.
I agree, defines the space.
Andres and then Tony?
Speaking of bollards, not these here, but at one point, we had talked about being able to put some bollards at the end of the Second Street on both ends, one by Elm and one by Central, that could be, you know, could be used to,
Could be popped up.
popped
to
up and
close off
down.
the street.
and they don't even have to look like this, right? But
Yeah.
is that an option that we can look at?
Because they're not crash rated, they're really not gonna serve a purpose. So for an event, we would still have something crash rated to help prevent the car from going through either accidentally or intentionally. So-
Right, but can we add that to this conversation, or as part of this package, to look at crash-rated bollards and go up and down,
Oh,
so we can close down the street?
yeah, I mean, I think it would be separate from a lighting project.
Okay.
And then, right, Chief, you wanna jump in? We've got
Yeah,
other
I mean,
solutions.
yeah, I understand. I think we're saying we're open to any suggestions where we can protect, you know, the street. We do have some equipment that we purchased, but it's not totally fixed. So I don't know where this would lie in your Second Street piece, but I think he's asking for, even though they don't match these, that they're just an additional component all as part of this project, so.
Yeah, and I think we had in our budget, as part of kind of our emergency planning, the purchase. I just don't know, I can't remember where we were in terms of the selection
Okay,
of it.
I just want to lose sight of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any
And
that are
something more
crash,
attractive than like the Jersey barriers.
are there any that are crash rated, but that are quick release? Or that doesn't exist?
See, that's the trouble, right, to get that is, that's what we were finding difficulty with the bollards, to find that. No,
That's what I'm
no,
asking. I don't know if you found-
no, it was not. Now, you know, for a cost, things could get designed, but that's gonna take a lot of time and money to do that. And then there's also issues of, if you're gonna put those bollards in the street, you know, from a Public Works perspective, they create a challenge in terms of operation and maintenance, right? It's likely that they're gonna have some issues because of snow plows, and then they're gonna be fixed. Are they working? Are they not? There's some concerns around that just whole element of it too. If it's a permanent install, and then they like automatically come up. Expense, customization, anything that's customized is gonna be difficult to fix and maintain over time, costly.
So let's put a pin in that. We're gonna grab dinner. We're gonna have our council meeting. We need to
We're
come
almost
back for closed session and we can finish up the
Okay.
lighting
Okay.
bollard discussion.
We did,
There
I
is,
did,
but we're
Yeah.
gonna come back.
yep. Okay, yeah, there
'Cause
was.
I want everyone to have a chance to have dinner and not feel
Sure.
like they're gonna die.
Don't agree,
Yeah.
rushed. Okay.
So, Art, do we recess this?
You can just declare a recess, Mayor. Coming back to the whole, you declare a recess.
So I declare a recess and we'll
Yeah.
be back to talk about
The
these
catenary
policies.
lights, they need to, they require additional poles most likely, so they need to see.
Nice.
the numbers.
After the council meeting?
After the council.
After the council, okay, that's the approach. So this meeting will be declared.